Rain poured relentlessly that Monday morning, turning the city streets into silver mirrors. Emma clutched her old umbrella and hurried toward the bus stop, her shoes splashing through shallow puddles. She was already 10 minutes late, and her stomach churned at the thought of her boss's glare. A single mom with rent due and a 7-year-old waiting at daycare. She couldn't afford another warning. Then she saw him, a man lying near the sidewalk, half conscious, his briefcase tossed aside, papers scattered and soaked by the rain. Cars sped past, no one stopped. Emma froze for a heartbeat. She looked at her watch. She'd be late, maybe fired. But then she looked again at the man, clutching his chest, whispering for help. She dropped her umbrella. Without hesitation, she knelt beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man's lips moved faintly. She tore off her scarf, folded it under his head, and called an ambulance. While waiting, she held his cold hand and kept talking to him. About the rain, about staying awake, about how everything would be okay. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but to Emma, it felt like hours. They thanked her for staying. She smiled weakly, realizing her hands were shaking, her clothes soaked, and her shift had started 15 minutes ago. When she finally reached the small cafe where she worked, her manager stood by the counter, arms crossed. "You're late again, Emma," he said sharply. She tried explaining, but he cut her off. "We can't keep doing this. You're a good worker, but we need reliability." "I'm sorry." Her throat tightened. She nodded, trying to hold back tears as she handed over her apron. That night, she sat in her dimly lit kitchen, staring at her son as he colored quietly at the table. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she whispered. "Mommy will find something better." But deep inside, she felt the weight of uncertainty crushing her. 2 days later, she received a call. A calm, polite voice said, "Miss Emma, this is St. Clair Industries. Our CEO would like to meet you personally." Confused, she almost hung up, thinking it was a mistake. But curiosity won. The next morning, she entered the company's grand building. Marble floors, glass walls, and people in tailored suits. A receptionist led her to the top floor. When the elevator doors opened, she froze. Behind a sleek desk sat the same man, the one she had found on the street. His face was no longer pale, though a small bandage covered his temple. He smiled softly. "Emma," he said, standing. "We'll meet again." She gasped. You're okay. Thanks to you," he replied. "The doctors said I had a mild heart episode. If you hadn't stopped." His voice trailed off. "You didn't just save my life. You reminded me that kindness still exists in this world." Emma's eyes glistened. "I just did what anyone would do." He shook his head. "No, most people walked past." He gestured for her to sit. "I heard what happened at your cafe," he said quietly. "Losing your job for helping a stranger. That doesn't sit right with me." He handed her a letter. "I'd like you to manage our new community cafe project. Flexible hours, benefits, and," he smiled, "a team that values compassion as much as coffee." Emma blinked, her breath catching. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "You gave me time I didn't think I had. Now I want to give you the same. Time to breathe, to live, and to raise your son without fear." She looked down at the letter, her trembling hands struggling to hold it steady. The world around her blurred as a single tear slipped down her cheek. And for the first time in a long while, Emma didn't feel late for life. She felt right on time. Emma sat there speechless, the letter shaking softly in her hands. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The world had been cruel to her for so long that kindness felt almost unreal, like a dream she didn't deserve. The man smiled gently. "You didn't just save me, Emma. You reminded me that success means nothing without compassion. I built companies, but you built something stronger. Hope." Her lips trembled. "I only did what my heart told me to do. And that," he replied, "is exactly what the world needs more of." He walked her to the window, overlooking the city. The same streets where she had once rushed, scared and tired, holding on to nothing but faith. Every day, he said softly, people rush past each other, lost in their own struggles. But one act of kindness, it can stop the noise. It can change everything. Emma looked down at the busy sidewalks below, where umbrellas moved like a sea of strangers. She thought about how she once stood among them, invisible, unheard, and afraid. Yet here she was now, standing beside the man whose life she had touched with nothing but a simple choice to care. Weeks later, the new community cafe opened its doors. A place designed not just for business, but for belonging. The sign above the entrance read, "The Kind Cup. Every coffee. A connection." Emma stood behind the counter, smiling as she served a young mother carrying a baby. "You're doing great," she said warmly, remembering her own sleepless nights and endless worry. The billionaire often visited quietly, sitting in the corner with a book and watching how Emma greeted each customer like an old friend. The cafe had become more than a business. It was a reminder that humanity still had a heartbeat. And one rainy evening, as Emma locked up, she looked at her reflection in the glass door. Tired but peaceful, worn but unbroken. She whispered to herself, maybe being late that day was life's way of making sure I arrived where I was meant to be. Because sometimes, the smallest detour becomes the greatest turning point. And one act of kindness, even when it costs you everything, can return as a miracle in disguise.